Welcome to the MultiCultural Mindset broadcast. Your host is Dr. Laverne Hanes Collins, a licensed professional counselor, award-winning trainer, and keynote speaker. Dr. Collins is the author of Overlooked: Counselor Insights for the Unspoken Issues in Black American Life. Dr. Collins has also been a featured monthly columnist in the American Counseling Association's Counseling Today magazine with her Honoring Diversity column. Now, here's Dr. Collins.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Multicultural Mindset, where we explore the intersection of race, faith, culture, and trauma and mental health. I'm your host, Dr. Laverne Hanes Collins, and I am excited. Oh, I'm so excited today about coming back to you after a 2-week holiday end of year break. So welcome back, everyone. And if this is your first time with us, welcome. We're glad that you are here today. Today, we are going to talk about breaking intergenerational trauma patterns and, oh my goodness, just some awesome stuff. I have an absolutely phenomenal guest, and I believe that she is going to pour into us from her wealth of knowledge. And when I say wealth of knowledge, I mean this woman is lighting up the sky with her contributions to the counseling community and the world at large. I'm speaking of Dr. Stacey Diane Aranez Litam. She is an associate professor of counselor education at Cleveland State University. She is a racial equity strategist. She is a licensed professional clinical counselor and supervisor, as well as a diplomate and clinical sexologist with the American Board of Sexology. Dr. Litam is a member of the Forbes Health Advisory Board. She serves as an advisory council member, also for the National Board for Certified Counselors, NBCC, Minority Fellowship Program. And she was named one of Crain's Cleveland 40 under 40 in 2023. I'm telling you, she's doing big, big things. As a speaker, Dr. Litam has partnered with, now listen to this, you all, Fortune 500 companies, nationally recognized brands, professional sports teams, multinational law firms, federal level organizations, political leaders, universities, and colleges. And her work, hold on, her work has been featured in the White House, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, we know it as SAMHSA in our field, Forbes Health, National Public Radio, the Filipino Channel, Discovery Magazine, Psychology Today, the National Institutes of Health, the Mental Health Academy, the Daily Mail, as well as in podcasts, documentaries, and news outlets. She has written or contributed to over 50 academic publications, including 17 research articles that are archived in the World Health Organization's Global Literature Database on COVID-19. All that, I could sum it up in one sentence and say she is one of the foremost leading researchers on the impact of racial discrimination on the mental health of diverse racial and ethnic groups. Dr. Stacey Diane Aranez Litam, thank you so much, Dr. Litam, for coming on the Multicultural Mindset broadcast today. I was thrilled when you said you could come on and talk to me and the listeners for an episode on breaking intergenerational trauma patterns, recognizing the pain of wounds and how to heal. So thank you for being willing to share with us today.
Of course.
Welcome.
Thank you. It truly is an honor to be here.
Well, it's an honor for me to have you. You know, I focus a lot on helping counselors who help Black Americans to heal. And when you told me about your book, when you sent me the email and told me all about it, Patterns That Remain, I knew I had to have you come on and talk to us, because what you've written in this book is providing, from what I see, a framework for all people whose ancestry includes any history of colonization, invalidation, identity-based trauma, and what are called diasporic wounds. So I'm going to ask you to define some of that in a few minutes. But first, let me ask you to tell us just a little bit about your heritage and your family history and how that influences your work.
Absolutely. So my ethnicity by origin is Filipina and Chinese. And so for many folks who don't know the history of the Philippines, we have a long history of colonization, first by the Spanish and then by the Japanese in World War II, and then also by America. And so we have 333 years of historical colonization and the ways in which that specific experience has been passed down across generations and imbued in culture has impacted many Filipino Americans, including myself, in the way that we understand relationships, in the way we understand trauma, and the way we understand the way we relate to one another. So I talk a lot about this in some of my talks, but my direct lineage is one that is a distinct survivor of historical trauma. And so going all the way back in World War II, 8 hours after the Japanese army bombed Pearl Harbor, they turned their attention to the Philippines. Now, the first thing they did when they invaded Manila was they annexed our ancestral home. And so, for a period of time, the Japanese army lived on the first floor of my Lola's home, and they were relegated to the second floor. So, you have to imagine what it must have been like to not just witness on a daily basis the atrocities done by the Japanese army onto our kababayan or our Filipino community, our people, and then also have to be in a shared physical space. The sort of human atrocities that my Lola witnessed were my bedtime stories growing up, and how these messages around not trusting Japanese men, specifically older Japanese men, that was a message that I didn't even realize I had inherited until I was sitting in a room one day as a counselor and getting ready to do an intake on an older Japanese man. And so I have this very distinct memory of taking him back from the lobby, walking him into my office and thinking, okay, I've looked at his intake. He looks like he's got some challenges around partner and children distress because he feels like his children forgot where they came from. He feels like his children are too white. They're not connected to their culture, right? So I'm thinking, okay, like I can relate to this. I myself am an immigrant. I was born in the Philippines, and I know my mother and I have had similar conversations around me forgetting where I've come from. So I'm already feeling connected. I'm feeling related. I'm feeling excited for this intake. As soon as that door shut behind me and I heard that click, everything in my body shifted. I felt like my heart was in my ears. I was experiencing tunnel vision, that every time my heart beat, it pulsed just a little bit. It was this immediate sort of fight, flight, freeze, play dead, fawn response. And I remember sitting across from this older Japanese man and just thinking, I feel so physically unsafe. All I want to do is run out that door. And I couldn't figure out why that was. We did the intake. He was, talking about the distress he felt about his kids not being Japanese enough. And I went home that night thinking, what in the world was that? I couldn't understand what was coming up for me until I texted some friends who also are Filipino and said, well, didn't you tell us about your Lola? And that's when I remembered, okay, I've internalized some pretty specific cultural scripts about what it means to be Filipina. And it sort of led me on this journey to reflect on what are some other cultural scripts that are grounded in intergenerational trauma that I've carried with me for a lifetime. And a lot of those are reflected in the book. Scripts like work twice as hard to get half as far. Scripts like just be grateful for the opportunity. Keep your head down. Don't complain. Scripts like don't rock the boat. Don't cause waves because you never want to be the one that stands out. And these are the same message that I realized weren't just specific to me, but they existed across Asian Americans. They are imbued in Black American culture. They exist in Latina communities. They exist across all communities, including white communities. And so I really wanted to understand where that comes from and then give folks the tools to be able to untangle some of those scripts.
What a powerful story. That backstory is extremely powerful. I'm going to ask you to define something for me that a word, a term that you used, Alola.
Yes, thank you. So Lola is Tagalog for grandmother. So it's yeah, it's like it's in Tagalog.
Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. I wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page and would understand exactly who or what you were referencing with that. But what a powerful, powerful story, and how how amazing for you to catch that and not that the experience you had with that elderly Japanese person, man, and not to brush it off, but to pay attention and to consider what was happening on the inside for you. Now,
Mm.
obviously, as a counselor, we're taught to pay attention to what comes up for us and what goes on for us, but you really you went to the core of it. And I'm so glad that you did because you went to that core for yourself. You're going to help others do the same. That's amazing. That's amazing. Uh, diasporic wounds, the term diaspora, we're going to talk about that, but let's talk first for those who might be listening who might not be familiar with the term. Diasporic peoples are those who have been scattered. So I'd love to hear you talk about the relevance of a diasporic experience and what is meant by diasporic wounds, because my one of my favorite themes, or what are we overlooking? That's an overlooked reality. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad we're starting there, Dr. Collins, because it's so important. And if we don't know where we've come from as a people, as a community, then it's really hard to know where we're going. And so when I think about the relevance of a diaspora and diasporic wounds, I think about things like ethnic identity, and I think about the ways in which this displacement impacts our sense of belonging. So we think about how folks who are scattered, folks who are no longer living in the country in which we are originating from, that impacts our sense of ethnic identity and can lead to some trauma related to who we are and how we're supposed to be in this world. So when I think about the diasporic wounds or diasporic wounds that many of us carry, a lot of it is around a sense of self. A lot of it is around a sense of belonging and how that all links back to attachment wounds. These attachment wounds that are passed down generationally, these feelings of often how love exists in transaction and reciprocity. So we think to our immigrant parents, and not just Asian immigrants, but folks from all kinds of locations from every country. We have folks who focus on scarcity. We have folks who focus on survival. Our parents focused on survival, and in that way, they weren't able to access the emotional or cognitive capacity to hold emotional, psychological space for a lot of us. And so we grow up with these attachment wounds and we think, my parents didn't love me in the way that I wanted them to. My parents didn't say, I love you. They didn't hold space for me. They instead invalidated my experiences of stress, anxiety, or sadness. they perhaps engaged in spiritual bypass. Just pray about it. If only you were a good enough Christian, you wouldn't have these experiences. If only you believed in your higher power, then he would have protected you or she would have protected you. And so we sort of feel resentment and we feel distress about the way our parents raised us. And that carries into our adult relationships. And so all of this is linked to sort of how diasporic wounds are grounded in a lot of things, and then that can result in attachment traumas, in ethnic identity traumas, because many of us feel like we're not enough. We're not African enough. We're not Latina enough. We're not Asian enough because we don't speak the language. We're not as connected to the culture. Maybe we're not imbued and immersed in the ritual and the dance and the food and the practices of our people and our tribes from which we came. And then there can be a sense of, ooh, who am I really? And is the person that I believe myself to be connected enough to the people from where I came?
Wow. I had for years taken groups to Africa on mission trips, and my very first my very first trip to Africa, one of the participants said, "Oh, it was her first trip to Africa too." She said, "I have understood my American, but I get it now. Having been here, now I understand my African in my African American."
Mm.
And that was such a powerful statement. And I think what you just said connects with that. Like I have a desire to understand my nativity, my native identity, as well as my native and historical identity, as well as my present citizenship.
Yes. Yes, and I think part of that is sort of giving folks permission to exist in Blackness, to exist and embrace Black identity, because that's not something that I think, number one, feels safe in American society. It's not one that folks often feel comfortable with, because that existing in and embracing and being immersed in Blackness has been met with such resistance historically in a country like this that is sort of, where white supremacy is the room tone, right? The room tone I think about in movies when you're filming a movie, when there's silence, it's not silence. You're using a big boom mic, one of those big fuzzy mics, to just capture the background noise of any space. And in
Mm.
America, the room tone, the sort of background noise that exists and that we don't see until we find it, is white supremacy.
Oh, what a powerful metaphor, Dr. Litam. Oh, so powerful. The tone in the room. Wow. The sounds when no one's talking.
Mhm.
The background noise. Wow, is white supremacy.
Mhm.
I have read that there is the internalized racism that I personally associate with my many of my people, and even in my own journey of overcoming my own internalized racism. I'm understanding from people, and tell me if you have this understanding too, that internalized racism is not just a black white thing.
Mhm.
What's your understanding or your experience perhaps with internalizing all of that background noise of
Oh,
white supremacy?
how much time do we have? Um, we know as counselors and helping professionals that there are ethnic and racial identity development models. And although they sort of are distinct across groups, there are these specific stages that tend to be shared. And so the first one is, we grow up, we're living in our household, and we just think that what we do is normal. What we do, the foods we eat, the rituals we engage in, the practices we have, that they're just like everyone does them. And then we go to school and we realize, oh, your family is different than mine. And I have very distinct memories of my mom packing my lunch and packing Filipino food, and the white kids in school saying, "What are you eating?" that looks gross. That tastes funny. That smells funny. That looks like dog food. And I remember thinking immediately, ooh, I no longer want to do this. I feel shame because I'm different and I want to be more like you. Because if I'm like you, I'll be accepted. And so I have this really, sort of challenging moment where I was growing up and really chasing white proximity.
Mhm.
I talk a lot about this in my book, but there was a moment where I identified as a Twinkie. I was yellow on the outside, white on the inside. And if I was able to make the joke first before you did, I would be a good Asian. I would have more access to social capital. I'd be more accepted because I was more like them. And so we have this sort of process, this reckoning of, okay, but is this working for me? And how is this serving me? And then so later in life, I realized, okay, I can't keep doing this. And this identity that I've cultivated for myself is not actually keeping me safe the way that I thought it was. So, what does it look like to be unapologetically Asian? What does it look like to just be in my Asianness and stop trying to fit in and stop trying to do the things that I thought I needed to do to get that acceptance? And so, for me, it happened later in life, unfortunately. Um, and that's pretty characteristic of sort of Midwest Asians. It would have looked different if I grew up on the East Coast or West Coast where there was more of us. But I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, so there was like five of us. There's not many.
Wow. And then on the other hand, on the other side of that coin is the acting white accusation that you
Mm.
can get from within the culture.
Mhm.
Does I've experienced that. I know others in my family have, my children have experienced that.
Mm.
How does that fit in? Do we need to heal from that too?
Absolutely. So, what you're describing is interethnic othering. And so, you have this sort of spectrum where, on one hand, you have folks who are too assimilated, they are too Black, right? They are not able to fit into society because of X, Y, and Z, or they're too Asian. They have accents, they only eat Asian food, they only, practice cultural things, and they don't know how to fit into white culture, right? They're eating pizza with chopsticks. And then on the other hand, you have this sort of like whitewashed presence of, oh, you're not Black enough. You are, you're too white. You're doing all the things that white folks do, and you're not connected to your culture. And somewhere in the middle is this bicultural identity, someone who can, we call it code
Code
switching, but
switching.
hoping to get away from that because I think that code switch sort of has like a negative connotation. But what code switching is at its core is survival. Like we are learning how to read a room and then respond in a way that will keep us safe, that will let us know that we are accepted and that we can navigate. So we have this really incredible acuity to read with whom am I able to be my authentic self. And so I really want to contextualize that as something that's really important because to be able to read a room and determine in which locations and places and with which people can I be my authentic self, that's hugely important and a really important protective factor for mental health. And so we love that. So we're trying to move away from this sort of stigma around code switching being bad.
Okay. Okay. So let's focus on the strain or the stress of that and more focus on the benefit, the survival capability that comes with being able to operate in multiple spaces.
Absolutely. We'll also
Okay.
hold it for the fact that that's really exhausting, right? Like racial battle fatigue is a very real
Mhm.
phenomenon. And
Mhm.
part of it is having to engage in that, especially as students or, counselor educators in predominantly white institutions. Like, that's a real source of, exhaustion and stress and compassion fatigue, which can lead to racial battle fatigue.
Yeah. Racial battle fatigue is real, and it's real for a lot of people right now in the United States. because we are living in times that we didn't think we would have to revisit in reality. So, yeah. So your book, Patterns That Remain, A Guide to Healing for Asian Children of Immigrants. Now, you combine research with storytelling and some historical facts to offer a framework for healing and a framework for attachment, and done it so beautifully, so phenomenally. What is the most important message that your book conveys from your perspective, from your heart? It's the most important thing.
Oh my gosh, how do I pick one? It feels like every chapter is a child of mine. And so like I now have to pick my favorite child. Um, I think,
Even an overarching summary, an overarching theme.
can I pick two?
Sure.
Okay, so the first overarching theme is that we are more alike than different. And that I think, well, I believe and I know that as folks read the book, they will see themselves in these pages in a way that they have not felt seen. And that's really exciting.
Awesome.
And then the second thing is this sort of evidence-based framework that I've developed around healing attachment wounds, what we need as Black, Indigenous people of color, or people of the global majority to heal from the attachment wounds that are grounded in sort of transactional reciprocity that our parents have imbued. So the first one is that people will feel seen as they read this book. And the second is the framework for healing attachment wounds that is specific to this project.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Feeling seen, heard, celebrated even, right? And then bringing that personal growth and awareness to your other relationships in a healing manner. As you heal, you bring the attachment healing into the lives of others, into your interactions with others. Safe to
Exactly.
say that? Yeah. Now, who can use this book? Who's your intended audience?
Everyone. And I know that sounds so sort of silly, but it's for everyone. If you are a mental health professional, this is for you. If you are a counseling grad student or a mental health grad student, this is for you. If you are someone who has been told you have to work twice as hard to get half as far, if you're someone who has struggled with scarcity mindsets, this is for you. If you're someone who has a history of insecure attachment in relationships, or your partner is someone who has struggled with insecure attachment in relationships, this is for you. If you are a parent or hope to become a parent and you want to break intergenerational patterns of trauma,
Mm.
your children, there's a whole chapter on parenting and breaking those wounds. This book is a love letter to everyone who has felt they are not good enough.
Mm. Well, there you have it. And for the helpers who support and help people in those stages of identity and growth and self-love, self-appreciation, right? So yeah, for the lay people, the community members, as we would say, and for those who work in mental health as helpers and supporters. And I would imagine not just mental health helpers, so to speak, but religious helpers,
Mhm.
perhaps social context teachers. How about
Mhm.
educators, educating children? That seems like a great audience too, to bring understanding to the realities. Even if someone says, well, no, that's not my reality. I grew up white, or I grew up in this way or that way, and I never felt, I mean, there may be that kind of response to this, but to understand the reality of other
Mm.
people that you teach, the patients in your hospital, nurses, right? Your nurses, you have patients from with diverse histories, and teachers, et cetera, pastors, and again, religious leaders, everybody who interacts in helping ways needs to
Yes.
understand. Yeah, I am so, so excited for you. Now, the book is coming out January, what's today, 7th?
January 7th. So the Kindle is already out. That dropped in December. And then the hard copy is out January 7th. We're very excited.
Well, where can people purchase your book first, and then how can they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I invite folks to buy the book from Black-owned, Asian-owned, queer-owned, BIPOC or PGM-owned bookstores. And if there are not one in your area, you can do the Google. You might pay a little bit extra for shipping, but I really want to support Black, queer, Asian, and PGM, BIPOC-owned bookstores. If there's really not one in the area and it's more convenient, you can also get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. I'm also available for speaking engagements. My email is stacyalitam@gmail.com. That's STACEYALITAM@gmail.com.
Excellent. And I'm going to put put your contact information on the closing screen. I like to do that for my guests, and people will read there how to purchase your book and how to get in touch with you. Thank you so much, Dr. Litam, for this phenomenal conversation. I knew that we were going to receive from your wealth of knowledge. And as I said before, you are wealthy with knowledge and expertise. And this has just been a phenomenal conversation. So thank you. Are there any closing words or thoughts that you want to share with our listeners today before we sign off?
I think the closing thought that comes to mind is just an invitation for folks to remember that you are worthy of love and belonging, compassion, and kindness.
Oh, you are worthy. You are worthy. Yes. Love, compassion, kindness, all the things you said. Thank you so much for that. And I hope, listeners, I hope you believe that. I really want you to believe that. I really want you to hear that. I really want you to embrace that. And I really want you to celebrate that. And I know Dr. Litam feels the same way. But wherever you are, whoever you are, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode on intergenerational patterns, understanding the diasporic wounds and the intergenerational trauma. I hope this episode encourages you, if you're a provider, to look deeper into your practice, to challenge old assumptions and develop a truly inclusive approach to therapy. You've heard me say before, if you've listened before, that no matter how excellent my K-CREP accredited program was 30 years ago, I learned how to see life through a white lens and think for white understanding and to process via white filters, and essentially did not learn how to effectively work with anyone who really was not white and white American. And as a result of that, what we've embraced are deficit models of other cultures, other people. We have blamed, and we have worked hard to come up with fix-it models. And what we really need in our profession is more healing sometimes than emphasis on diagnosis. And that's what I hope we're presenting to you. Dr. Litam, phenomenal job today presenting just that. Remember, creating a safe space for clients means validating their whole self, including their ethnicity, including their culture, their racial identities. So let's continue this journey toward cultural understanding together, cultural respect, cultural celebration. And let's do that one step at a time as we develop a multicultural mindset. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like it, love it, whatever your platform allows you to do. Be sure, if you're looking at YouTube, Please subscribe to my channel. Please leave a review, and please share it with others who might benefit from what we've talked about today. This is Laverne Hanes Collins signing off, and until next time, keep practicing with empathy, humility, and a multicultural mindset. Thanks so much. Bye for now.